So I guess I'll go first. I'm Poppy.
I'm Ditto.
I'm Serena.
I'm Lemon.
And welcome to WitchesBrew.
Woo! First episode.
Yeah,
That's already a mess.
They don't have to know that.
Yeah, this is gonna be edited anyway. It's fine. So, Lemon, what is our topic today?
So today our topic is Harry Potter and some of the character, I guess, aspects of Harry Potter. To start off, my aspect topic that I picked out was Severus Snape and the divide between the fandoms of it. So to, I guess, get a feel of the room, I know, Poppy, kind of your feelings on this, but what do you think on him as a character as a whole?
As a character as a whole, I would say he did turn out to be a good guy in some aspects. He did eventually help Harry, and spoilers, if you guys haven't seen Harry Potter, go watch it. Stop listening to this and go watch it right now.
Yeah, that would kind of be a good point.
Exactly. But in the end, where he gives Harry one of his tears, I think it was.
Yeah.
Is that the right one? Yeah, it is.
Yes.
And for him to see, his view on what had happened up until his dying moments, so to speak, I guess. I feel like that was really important, and I guess he is kind of a good guy in some aspects. I don't know, I want to hear other people's take on it, because I kind of already we've kind of already talked about this in a separate thing.
Yeah. Serena, what do you think? What?
I agree with Poppy that he is in a gray area, but I think most of his actions, I'm not gonna say all of his actions, but most of his actions were for the greater good, so to speak. So
yeah,
I'm leaning more towards good guy than bad guy, but he's still definitely in a gray area for me.
Yeah.
I feel like everybody's in that area, except for the people that don't like him.
Yeah, no, and I feel like that's an important thing to point out, is that a lot of people who look at the Snape likers, or the people who kind of understand where Snape's coming from, usually think that, people believe that Snape's a saint and that he was so good, and when realistically he did live in a gray area, that it wasn't you can't really pull him one way or another when he did do good things, and yeah, he was an asshole in some aspects. And I think it's important to clarify that aspect of him as a person.
So are we kind of jumping into the topic as to why? Oh, Ditto, what's your opinion on this? What do you think?
So there is a lot of, I wouldn't necessarily, there's a lot of ambiguity to go along with it. There's an old anecdote that the sins of the father should not be paid for by the son, or something to that nature. Which is kind of what happens throughout the first, 5 or 6 books until his ultimate death, where he kind of redeems himself in one fell swoop. But he was kind of ceaselessly and just endlessly targeting Harry for being a Potter, because his father did treat Snape poorly. So it's kind of a, yes, he was a massive asshole.
Yeah.
There's nothing that you can really do to redeem that. Just in general.
What you said based off of like, oh, just because like he was James's son that he got treated like horribly, essentially, you know.
And I'm typically in the camp of, oh, Snape was an okay guy.
And I feel
but,
like there's a lot of people that would agree with you.
Yeah, he's just an okay guy. He, was kind of abusive in the first little while, but in the end he came around and was one of the good guys. And, and we have to think about as well is that he put his life at risk for a good 3 years to spy on Voldemort with that. So I think that kind of tips the scales a little bit farther into good guy, but that still doesn't really excuse the fact that he still treated Harry poorly all throughout the books until that very last scene where he was about to die and he realized that he was leaving the world and he was not going to be able to. I don't necessarily think he thought this far necessarily, but he wasn't going to be able to protect the last piece of Lily that he had. Because I think he did kind of.
Really likes Lily, so.
Yeah, I think he did really like cherish whatever fucked up relationship he had with Harry.
Yeah, honestly.
Yeah.
At some level, he probably cherished that relationship. He probably let his emotions get better of him more often than not in terms of his abuse towards Harry. But in the end, he realized that, this is the last piece of Lily. I'm leaving this world. I sure as hell hope this kid doesn't go and fucking get himself killed.
Then what does he do? Immediately run in the Forbidden Forest.
Goes and gets himself killed. Which ends up, I guess we can kind of springboard off of that into the
well, let me ask something of the crowd really quick. Sorry, Ditto.
No, you're good.
Give you a second. Sorry. Do you guys think that if Harry would have been somebody else's son, like if he would have been, say, Neville's parents' son, like, or another family's son, do you think Snape would have treated him differently than he treated him?
Oh yeah, sure.
Yeah, there's a very strong likelihood he would have. Actually, here's the funny thing with that is that the prophecy referred to both him and Neville. So if Neville's parents had gotten murdered and James and Lily's parents would have gotten murdered, Harry likely would have gotten this treated the same way.
Like I would just make that
if not
a springboard to bounce off.
Yeah.
Of, so.
Well, if not worse either, because at that point, I don't know necessarily what would have happened because I think there was nothing Snape could do to save Neville's parents, but I don't know how he would have reacted if Bellatrix and them went to go and torture the Potters.
Yeah,
exactly. I mean, like it's a different story.
Well, I do think maybe if it had been Neville, who had been chosen and Voldemort had gone over there, I do think Snape would have been a different person because obviously, he wouldn't have turned to Dumbledore because Lily got killed and she was going to get hurt. But at the same time, I do think a lot of people get annoyed with Snape because he bullies Neville, and I think one of the very important things that people have to realize about Snape is that you have to look at his past and where he came from and think about it almost from a psychology aspect of it and where he was in his headspace, because though his past doesn't justify his actions, it does explain it. And people who get so butthurt over Neville getting bullied by Snape don't realize that Neville was the other person that was supposed to happen to, and that if it had happened to Neville, Lily wouldn't be dead. And I'm sure that Snape blames Neville in an aspect of it because
sure.
Neville, like Lily would have been alive, and so it's a thing of like I said, you kind of have to look at his past and realize that the things that had happened to him explain why he acts that way to Harry, Neville, and everyone else.
I don't necessarily. No, go ahead.
I also feel like, being a psych major, hi, hello, that I feel like I have a fair share in this because, you know, being a psych major and kind of learning about, you know, trauma and, you know, having some of my own, for sure. You know, there's always that one aspect of, like, just because you have trauma does not mean you can bring it down on somebody else. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like, what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, no, true. Definitely.
So, like, you shouldn't, like, what Snape did to Neville, sure, it may or may not have been justified. I'm not saying that it is. Don't get me wrong. Don't put words in my mouth. I'm trying not to say. But, I just feel like, you know, maybe, you know, speaking from that psychological standpoint, like, trauma, that's a big thing. And especially all the trauma that, you know, he had, that Snape had, I should clarify.
Yeah.
That, you know, even though I guess there's an aspect of, like, him, like, Snape himself seeing some of him in Neville.
Yeah.
You guys understand what I'm saying here? I don't want to sound like an idiot.
Yeah, definitely. And I think also even in Harry, too, especially, like, with his past. Though, not to interrupt you, I do think maybe we should clarify, since we are talking about his past, what happened in his past.
That would be a smart idea.
Yeah, I just kind of realized, because I mean, we're kind of talking, as we all know, but a lot of people who support the Marauders and kind of think Snape's an asshole don't realize his past. So I do think it's important to mention that Snape came from a very poor, low-income family. His father was an abusive alcoholic, and he abused Snape's mother and Snape constantly of that. And also Snape, because they were very poor, he didn't have, you know, proper clothing, he didn't have anything. And so when he, you know, he met Lily before they went to Hogwarts, and they started becoming friends. And so he quickly soon kind of started realizing this was the one good thing in his life. This was the one thing that kind of pulled him away from his abusive family and household.
Yeah.
And he could kind of have to enjoy. And so of course, you know, when he went to Hogwarts, as most people know, he then started getting bullied there. And you know, the obvious James, Severus, and Remus and Wormtail, you know, they, though some are more at fault than others, James,
Yeah, exactly.
you know, they bullied him, you know, severely, and he went from being in this abusive, bullying household to going to an abusive situation at school as well. And so I think it's needed to note that Snape only really ever had an abusive life. He never had that, you know, kind of support, and the one thing that he had going for him was Lily. And so a lot of people point out, you know, how he was so, like, obsessed with her, and he was so, even, like, after she died, and even after she, you know, got married to James, he was still so, like, clung to her. And I think
infatuated with her, if you will.
Yeah. I think it's important, like I said, to note that that was the one good thing that he had in his life at all. And his past was so saturated in just darkness and abusiveness, because even when he, you know, kind of started getting friends, they were all Slytherin friends who were really abusive, not really specifically to him, but to other people, to other houses. You know, they had this viewpoint that they were better than everyone else because they were, you know, pure blood and they could do all this magic and stuff. And so he never really was able to get out of an abusive life space. And so, as well as it doesn't justify the fact that he bullied kids, it does kind of explain the fact that he didn't really know how to handle kids. He didn't really know how to handle that, because all he grew up in was abuse and those type of remarks getting told to him. And I also think it's interesting to say, because if you think about it, we only ever really hear of, like, Harry and Neville and, like, sometimes Hermione kind of getting bullied and stuff. You don't really hear that most people don't like Snape, but you don't hear of the bullying being done to Hufflepuff, the Ravenclaws. And so I think, people think, oh, Snape was such a bully, he bullied everyone. Well, personally, I don't believe that's true because we don't have evidence of it. He bullied the Golden Trio and he bullied Neville, which I would kind of incorporate in that group, because of the things that happened in the past. And while very vindictive and not handled well, his past does explain why those things happened. Like you said, I'm not like justifying it, but
Exactly, yeah.
because I think that would be stupid. To kind of completely ignore that Snape was now.
Like, not to, be rude here or anything, but like, are you trying to use his past as like what's the word I'm looking for here? Like, a reason that he's bullying the others?
Not particularly a reason, but an explanation.
I'm trying to find the right word, but I can't find it. Words are hard.
No. Yeah, I know what you're saying. No, and yeah, I do want to make that clear. Like, I'm not saying that it was justified, and I'm not saying that he should have been in any manner, because that's even as they're kids, and even if I don't like Harry himself, he does not deserve to go through that. No one deserves to be bullied, and I think that's kind of the point of it, that even though that did happen to him, of course, like, I think that would just be really stupid to completely ignore the fact that Snape was an asshole. But I do think it explains it, if that makes sense. And I do think pointing out the fact that Snape had been hurt too, that Snape was hurting all throughout school, and especially seeing the love of his life, the one thing that made him so happy, turn to the one thing that made him hate his world, that made him hate, wizarding people and stuff that weren't a part of his Slytherin group. That really seeded in him, and that's why he turned it.
Can you imagine being Snape in that circumstance, like seeing the love of your life go off with the bully that has bullied you for how many years in your whole life?
Well, I have something to add to that, actually.
Yeah, sure,
because there's a bit of backstory that you kind of missed in that portion. Is that Snape pushed Lily away because he was getting into the darker side of magic. So here's the thing. So all throughout school, until he pushed her away, she was very against James. James was like, "Come date me," and she was like, "No, I'm gonna go hang out with my friend." And then, once Snape got angry at her and pushed her away,
I'm not gonna date you, you're an asshole.
Right, exactly. But once Snape got angry at her and pushed her away, then she kind of gave up on that kind of protecting kind of thing, and she kind of ignored maybe the little bit of James's little bit mischievous side. I mean, given they were children at that point. But I have another thing as well.
I was gonna...
Two things. One, if Snape doesn't know how to deal with children, he shouldn't be a teacher. One.
He didn't want to be a teacher, actually, though. Dumbledore made him.
Well,
because that was his deal to Dumbledore, to help Lily and them, which obviously Dumbledore failed. But he didn't want to be a teacher. But go on.
Yeah. Another thing, we don't see all the abuse, all the potential abuse. I won't say that it exists, but it might very well exist, and it likely does exist, because we heard rumors throughout the entire books that he does abuse everybody with Slytherins. But here's the thing, we have the point of view that J.K. Rowling wrote the books in, being third person limited. We only see through Harry's eyes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
We only see what he sees. So if he doesn't see that, because they only had class with the Slytherins, with Snape. So they didn't get to see Snape with the Hufflepuffs and Snape with the Ravenclaws. So we don't know how Snape acted towards the other two. And I guarantee you he probably acted a little bit better in class, because he was stuck with the group of them and he needed to get their classes done, and he couldn't single out anybody in the class, because then I would single out that group, and that group would kind of refuse to work. But he could easily single out the Gryffindors and still say he's doing a fine class because the Slytherins are still doing their work. But I guarantee you that if he insulted the Ravenclaws, the Hufflepuffs, the other portion would be affronted and just stop working as well. So it was kind of a balance. But I guarantee you that he acted just as nasty to them outside of class, like taking points away and stuff like that. So we don't see that, because that's a little bit more difficult to see, because you don't necessarily see Snape in the hallways all too often. But I don't think we can say that he wasn't nasty to everyone. And I think it's far more he was nasty to everyone.
Yeah, I just was saying, like, I don't think it was as much. Like, I don't think, because everyone says because he bullied Harry so viciously that, he was just an asshole to everyone. I mean, I'm sure he was, but I don't think it was as severe. And you do bring up a good point. I was going to kind of bring it up a little later, because I had another point on the matter. But yeah, he did push Lily away in some aspects. In the whole Snape's worst memory scene, I do think, while Snape shouldn't have said what he said, in calling her a mudblood, I do think it was a very provoking thing by James to have done it, and I don't think Snape in his right mind would have ever really called her that. Because I know firsthand, from being bullied myself and actually dating the person who bullied me, the fact that never really goes away, and the harmful things that get said when you're getting bullied by people. And so you brought up a good point, that Snape was always kind of somewhat of an asshole. And yeah, it's one of those things where he lives in this interesting gray area where you can't really put him in a saint, because, like you said, he did end up eventually pushing Lily away. I do think that Lily's actions could have been served better, in maybe understanding or talking to Snape and being like, hey, look, you're getting bullied. Maybe you need someone to talk to about this. And, you're been hanging upside down with your underwear showing in front of the entire class. And, this one nasty ass kid is bullying the fuck out of you. Do you need someone to talk to?
And speak up for yourself, man.
Yeah, and I think it was also a thing of too. Snape came from a very prideful Slytherin group, and so I think when Lily was trying to help him, he was trying to stick up for himself in front of James and them, and just was failing so miserably that it was so misguided anger, that was suddenly just put on Lily. And I mean, I honestly 100% can understand that, because that has essentially happened to me. And I, especially in middle school, when I was getting bullied, I can completely understand that. I have said nasty things to people who was misguided, who were kind of part of the bullying, but it shouldn't have been said anyway. And so I can kind of
lashing out in anger, and that's what any teen kid would
do
at that point.
Yeah, and you can't excuse Snape for that, because he should have never called her that. But at the same time, again, you can understand where it came from. But yeah, I don't know. I think it's an interesting thing, because in this whole Snape good versus bad versus
the whole Snape debate.
Yeah, we'll just call it that, the Snape debate. The great Snape debate.
That's the title of the episode.
Yeah. Most people who are against Snape and who are very marauders, especially talk about how James was a kid, and that he grew up and he, changed and saw the maturity of his ways. Well, first off, they were still kids when they left, and that's when he started dating Lily. He, I think, was 21 when he died, or 20 or 21 when he died. So he was still most certainly a kid. And knowing from firsthand experience, those bullying aspects of someone don't go away. I think he didn't mature, but he realized that Lily wasn't going to date him or even have an interest in him unless he stopped being the way he was. I think change would be too strong of a word. He saw what Lily was looking for and yeah, like he molded to fit what Lily wanted, and because of Lily and Snape being on the fray because of what he had said to her, he kind of saw his opportunity to strike and to change the way he acted, not his mental like immaturity, but the way he acted.
Serena,
And I think,
do you have anything to bring up on this? What is your opinion on James
yeah,
and
you're
how he acted?
a bit quiet.
I'm just kind of taking in all the information because the way I felt upon it, I was like, it is misguided anger because because the way I perceived Snape in like the books and the movies was like in the little snippets you saw of his like memories, he was very like bottled up. He was very closed off to even like any.
Been there, done that.
So like,
Yeah.
I feel like in his character, he was so prideful to not get help. He's like, I can fix this on my own. I can do this, and it just never came. And he just like bottled it up, and then like when he like finally snapped, it was Lily the one that got hit.
Yeah.
Purely, I believe, on
Completely
accident. He was Lily was the one that got hit on that. It was purely on accident because she just happened to be at the wrong place in the wrong time.
Well, yeah, and think about that stressful situation you're in where, this person is bullying you in front of the one human you truly love and in front of the whole school. You're dangling upside down, in your underwear. And, and also.
Imagine? Like, oh my god.
Yeah.
No thanks.
And also, it's been also brought up, in also talking about the past, the Marauders, the situation that happened, with Sirius pranking Snape and almost killing him, and the fact that the Marauders never ended up. Yeah, the Marauders never got in trouble for that, and what basically happened was Snape, being smart, started realizing that Lupin was disappearing every month and that he was missing class a lot, and he kind of confronted Sirius about it and was like, what's going on? So Sirius is like, well, why don't you come to the Shrieking Shack and find out? And of course, the Marauders at that point could barely control Lupin and understand what was going on, much less, Snape just walking in blindly to something that was happening. And, it was supposed to be this big joke between all of them. And basically, whether you want to say that James got cold feet or that James saved him, either way what ended up happening was James basically pulled him out of getting hurt, and Snape was basically about to get mauled by a werewolf, and James pulled him out, and if you want to call it saving, and like I said, basically, the whole situation kind of got blown over by Dumbledore, and I have an inkling, and it was kind of brought up in the books that or at least in what Snape says, that it was just constantly all the things that they did just kept getting blown over, and they never really got.
They were basically rulers of the school at that point,
Yeah, they never really got in trouble, and all the kind of the antics that they had just kind of blew right over a lot of teachers, and like I said, I think it's an important thing to point out that while it's such a dynamic situation that, like, if you think about it and put yourself into that place, like how shitty that would be to get bullied and then to go home, get more bullied by your dad, and and then kind of just have the and then not only that, and then not only that, but to put on yourself that you realized you fucked up with the one person you cared about, you said something you didn't mean, but you can't take it back. And I think that's constantly
now she's run away with your bully, so there's that aspect too.
I think that's a constant cycle in the story of Severus Snape, that he's constantly messing up and then realizing he's messing up and trying to fix those mistakes, but people weigh his mistakes so heavily that he can't seem to arise up to it. And whereas many people who support James and the Marauders completely absolve James of his bullying and just kind of brush it off as boys will be boys, which is a very toxic view. And saying, oh, you know, like very, and just saying that, oh, you know, James was a kid, he matured, and well, no, he still, well, and there was other instances. I think even on Pottermore, J.K. had said that, you know, James did bully other students, that Snape wasn't the only one. It was just happened to be Snape the most because of being with Lily. And I think that's especially a thing that you see in Snape, where Snape bullies Harry just because of that one thing. And it kind of it's a psychological thing where, you know, the bullied becomes the bullier.
Yeah.
And
which is like,
you know,
that's always a thing that has happened. Like, I know, you know, there's always been like things that have been tossed around and that have been said, like, oh, like, you know, even though like you were bullied from a young age, like you shouldn't have to like bully another person just to get over your feelings, you know.
Yeah, definitely.
It's just like an endless toxic cycle. I'll edit that out later. It's just a toxic cycle of, you know, repetitiveness. And it's
most
not
definitely.
Healthy.
And should it happen? No. But does it? And is that a psychological thing that happens to kids who get bullied? Yeah, exactly. And it's like I said, it's very frustrating because James wasn't a saint either. And like I said, I don't truly believe that he ever really, like, people who bully like that.
None of the Marauders were saints.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. James and Sirius mostly are who I'm kind of targeting here because, you know, well, Lupin, he didn't bully them. He also didn't stop them, but take that as you will. And, you know, screw Peter.
Basically.
But he doesn't even deserve to be in this conversation.
Exactly.
It's one of those things where, you know, there are so many other people whose sins get kind of absolved, kind of brushed over, especially in James and Sirius's. You know, Sirius, until the very end, hated Snape. And even in Order of the Phoenix, you can see that when Snape comes in to literally help Harry, and who doesn't want to be doing this, and Sirius still calls him Snivellus and still picks a fight with him because of this school thing. And I think it's very the same thing of that he didn't really mature. They just had to change and adapt because of the world happening around them and what was going on. And it's a thing of you. Like, until Snape's very end, he kept trying to absolve himself. He kept trying to do better because he knew he fucked up in the past. And it just gets so weighed heavily down.
But it's not like
and I know from, like I said,
screwed up, so like that's kind of put on James almost, of like, yeah, you made me screw up, so I'm gonna screw with your kid, basically.
Yeah.
Is like
and
gotcha.
Even in, well, and think about it though, even in Harry's first year, Snape ended up being the one protecting him. Yet once again, Harry seemed to constantly always I can't speak.
Succeed?
Suspect. Gosh. Suspect Snape of something wrong. I'm currently reading Half-Blood Prince right now, and it's Snape, even though Dumbledore knows what's going on, and even Dumbledore's starting to get mad at him for always constantly bringing up Snape as being this bad person.
Yeah.
And I can kind of understand that. Bullying never goes away, and whether it's, you know, Snape being bullied or Harry being bullied by Snape, and by his own family. It doesn't go away. So I can understand where Harry is seeing this. But once again, it's always this huge, heavy weight of, oh, Snape, Snape is evil. Snape is bullying me. Snape is being mean to me. So therefore, he must be evil. He must be working with Voldemort. Like I said, from the point of a person getting bullied, I dated my bullier. And well, I know it was good for a while, but like I said, there were still some points where I could see it in him. I saw that old middle school bullying child again. And he never truly, well, he changed because he knew that he needed to for me. It never fully went away. That part of you that bullies just for fun, just for kicks because you can, never truly goes away. And I do think Snape was wrong in how he handled it.
I want to take a quick survey of the podcast group, if you will. Do you guys think that Snape's abuse justified why he bullied Harry?
No, because we can hearken back to the sins of thy father shall not be paid for by the son, and that kind of stuff. Where, yes, it may have been, why it shouldn't have necessarily happened.
I get you. Just a quick, Serena, what's your opinion? What do you think?
I think I'm gonna side with Ditto on this one. That yes, that could have been a reason. It shouldn't have it's more misplaced anger.
Yeah.
That's what I'm gonna say. It's more misplaced anger.
Do you think that was also the reason he kind of lashed out at Lily, was because of the misplaced anger, like we talked about a little bit earlier?
Yeah, very well.
She was purely just in the wrong place at the wrong place at the wrong time.
Yeah, and I kind of wanted to bring in, because you mentioned Sirius and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
We have to think about his upbringing as well, because you mentioned that he still hated Snape after all that time. We have to think about his upbringing. He was the first and only Gryffindor in a long line of Slytherins, related to some of the most evil wizards to exist, that being Bellatrix and the Lestranges and stuff like that. And even his siblings, Regulus was not a very friendly person, even though he did see the error in his ways. But I think a big thing is I think that James and Sirius were not like compatible. I think because James was very prideful and very arrogant about the way he went about his life, because he was, the Quidditch seeker. He was that, big badass jock guy that
he was the stereotypical jock.
Right. He just wiped the floor with everybody else, and he was like, I'm better than everybody. Here's this. And then Sirius was kind of that extra coercive force that was like, hey, I hate this guy because he represents all that I've fought against for my entire life, being an actual, kind of decent person. Let's go kick his ass. Right. Right. Like, let's go kick his ass and just, like, go from there. Which, I don't know, because, I mean, in the grand scheme of things, it is... Because there's part of James that wanted to bully Sirius. Or not Sirius, Snape, because of Lily. And I guarantee that's why he did something, was because Lily was there, and he was trying to get Lily, and he was trying to separate Snape from Lily. Because I feel like if it wasn't for Lily, it would have been either him and Lupin would have left Sirius, or him and Lupin would have stood by idly, just like Lupin did.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point to bring up, is the bystander aspect of Lupin, because he just kind of stood, like, I think, Lemon, you mentioned that earlier, he just kind of stood by and let it happen. He didn't really do anything to stop, James from doing what he did.
So is it almost worse to have the power to potentially do something and do nothing?
Absolutely. At least,
yeah.
personal experience.
Yeah, I'm kind of in two minds about that because I actually, as characters, I must admit that I do like Sirius and Lupin, but I'm glad that you brought up, Sirius's upbringing because they were Snape's and Sirius's were quite similar. Sirius grew up in an abusive household too, where he, never lived up to the expectations of his mother and the awfulness that his family wanted from him. But you have to realize that Sirius had that support system. Sirius had the rest of the Marauders. Sirius lived practically at James's house because of that, and he had the help he needed to kind of come out of that situation and realize that there is a better world that's not completely glum and that family and friends are important. Whereas, Snape never got that chance because all he saw was glum. I don't think Sirius was well adjusted in other situations, but I think in that one, in the family aspect, he was, because he realized how important the family of Marauders was to him and how they would always be by his side.
Yeah, and I think we can also talk about their ability to seize the power that they had. So James, coming from a powerful pureblood family, I don't know how powerful they were, but obviously they were descended of the Parabels, so pretty fucking powerful wizards.
Yeah.
And they were very
on his side
too.
Right. So that's probably where some of his arrogance comes from, but he had the power to do something. Is that if we had, I almost guarantee you that if Snape was in that same category, like if he was in James's place, right? If he was in James's place and he had that support structure by him, so Snape was, maybe they're in the same place. Snape is the Slytherin seeker, and James just is nobody, and Snape has a Sirius equivalent and a Lupin equivalent and a Peter equivalent. I almost guarantee you that Snape would act the same way towards James the same equivalent.
Yeah,
so
I'm the big jock, I can walk over everybody.
Right.
Like I have no.
Yeah,
I'm invincible to everything that comes my way, even though you're obviously not.
Right. Well, and I know that at least by Filch, they were heavily punished.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily know if that was passed down from Dumbledore or if that was just because Filch's a dickhead, but I mean, more likely because Filch's a dickhead, but
yeah. At least from the research I've done on like old Pottermore articles and stuff, it was very much where like it was lower, but Snape always wanted Dumbledore to say something because he got in trouble by Dumbledore for stuff, and Dumbledore not being the one saying anything, Dumbledore kind of looking the other way, because of that was really, because I think you are correct, and like Filch kind of was like, I ain't gonna take your shit, Potter. But I think it was more of Snape was looking for Dumbledore's like stopping in it, and he didn't ever get that really.
Yeah. Well, we also have to think about Dumbledore's partial bias as well in this whole thing, is that I think he was more willing to support the perceived good guys in this situation. So he wasn't gonna go out of his way to help the Slytherins out because they were churning out dark wizards that were helping Voldemort, that he knew was going to be a problem at some point, because he taught Voldemort, Tom Riddle at that point, but he taught this evil dark wizard, and he knew exactly what was going to happen. At some point, he was just waiting for that to drop, that other shoe. And I mean, he dealt with Grindelwald too, as well. Is that he's seen dark wizards, and I am of the belief that Dumbledore practiced dark magic at some point.
Oh no, she said he did, because he wanted to. It's plot line that he wanted to take over the world with Grindelwald.
Yeah, but I think he didn't go quite as far as Grindelwald did, because he is naturally a good person, but he is a compulsive liar with more biases than I can count.
Yes.
Or
No,
biases
and-
that I
well-
can make up.
And I
Right. Yeah.
well, and you would think though then as headmaster and seeing all of this that you would want if you saw someone starting to turn down that path because of what was happening to him, you would think you would want to give them the support system. Like obviously, Bellatrix and them, like they were already down that path. But Snape came in not knowing that, and not even really knowing that path. His mom was a witch, yes, but his dad was a muggle, and they lived in a small town that didn't really like know kind of what was going on so much. You know what I'm saying? And you would think
I didn't know
Dumbledore would want to.
why the owls were flying into the windows.
Well,
And
yeah,
it couldn't necessarily been a lost case, or he could have viewed it as a lost case, because at that point, I'm sure a good portion of the Slytherin class was going to grow up and be supporters of Voldemort. So it was really, maybe Dumbledore saw it as he was fighting a losing battle against that whole thing. Is that he was trying to... Maybe he was trying the same method as he did with Harry in the sixth book, and just ignore him and hope the problem goes away.
Which obviously did not happen.
Well, no. But at least,
and that's,
Snape came around eventually.
yeah,
didn't
no, and
really
It comes back to him coming around as like trying to be a good guy and like trying to redeem himself for, screwing up so bad.
Mm-hmm.
yeah, and like I said, I think it's interesting because a lot of people look at that and go, okay, yeah, he did that, but he still bullied people. Well, okay, yeah, you are correct, but you can't just completely ignore him doing all these other things to save the Wizarding World, to save Harry, always constantly looking after Harry, even though Harry was arrogant in some aspects. You can't completely absolve one or the other either, But I do think it also comes down to GK's storytelling as well, and the unfair demonizing of Slytherins, and kind of where she left people like us who love the story but identify with Slytherin or get put into Slytherin house, and then as people, especially Gryffindors, go, oh, Slytherin, like evil, like when almost every Slytherin that I know who's been sorted into that house is nowhere near evil.
That you know of.
And so
Well, the key, what is it? The key trait of Slytherins is their cunning.
Yeah, I was just gonna mention
And that's not necessarily a bad thing. Necessarily, it means that they're ambitious and cunning. So they're willing to do what it takes to get to where they want to go, basically. So it's not necessarily.
Yeah.
I think a lot of where
Serena, you're a Slytherin. Do you agree with what we're saying here about the Slytherin house?
Yeah, are you evil?
No, not that I know of yet, at least.
Cackles maniacally.
What was that? Want to repeat?
Cackles maniacally.
I think that as a Slytherin, we do get a bad rep, but
Often.
seeing as all of the more famous Slytherins did turn to Voldemort, it does, a large portion of them did, which makes it oh, if most of them did, then just lump them in as a stereotype. But cunning in itself as an adjective is a very gray adjective. We will do anything to achieve our goals, but that could also mean doing something that we could go against morally. But it has to be done to reach the certain goal.
Well, and even then, we could talk about each of the Hogwarts houses. It's really unfair to sort, 11-year-old kids at the age of 11, where they're not even.
Talk about Serena's house. Should we mention what houses the rest of us are in? That would be a smart idea.
I'm a Hufflepuff.
Hey!
Damn proud of it.
that makes 3 of us.
So
Yeah,
we're
right.
Hufflepuffs and a Slytherin.
Yeah, that's fun. Sorry.
So we're gonna. It's okay. We're all friends here. Hufflepuffs are very accepting.
Yes.
Yeah.
Try to
Getting
be.
along with the traits. So we have Gryffindors.
They're
Are
going
very,
to be my Huffle buddies.
Hey, just
well,
don't eat us.
is very brazen,
Eat us.
brash, and they act impulsively. So Gryffindors will just do whatever comes to their mind, and they'll do it no matter the consequences.
Mm-hmm.
Ravenclaws are
Shoot now, ask later.
right. Shoot now, ask later. Ravenclaws are known to be just intelligent, so they think before they act. So they're kind of the
They're
foil
book
of
smart.
right. They're book smart. They're the foil of Gryffindor. And then Hufflepuffs are kind of they're to use a horrible kind of phrase, but that's very true. The potheads of the Potterverse.
Yes.
Come on, you
Yeah.
kitchen.
Is that they're very chill.
Loving.
They're very chill. They accept everyone, and
They
the way
do
that I've
not
kind
care.
of right, they do not care. The way that I've kind of chosen to kind of glue them together. So Hufflepuffs are kind of the glue that hold all of Hogwarts together because they accept everybody and they can
Yeah.
kind of talk between the 3 of them. But here's the thing: so all of the houses form one human, like trait-wise.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you, because they kind of balance out and produce that like magically, intelligent, willing to do what they need to do, brave enough to do it, and nice enough to get it done person. So it's like this ideal human specimen that just like has all those traits and is able to get done what they need to get done.
And I think, didn't JK talk about that? I feel like she might have talked about that somewhere. Maybe
Probably.
in an interview I watched or something.
Yeah, probably, and a lot of philosophers talk about it too. Is that whole thing?
Of like being one human with the 4.
Yeah, and even then, the Sorting Hat even talks about it.
Yeah.
We must stand together to kick Voldemort's ass.
I honestly wish that the Sorting Hat had said it exactly like that.
It's not child friendly.
No,
Yes.
First book in the middle of the song that they
Just-
sing
Yeah.
in the sorting ceremony.
Also, can you think about this though? That all of these people from age 11 to 18 are living under the same roof. Like, how is that safe? Like,
All the hormones.
what?
It's not. There's a spell that's very useful in this whole thing. It's called Fetus Deletus.
All right. Yeah. Right.
Okay, you also have to think about if we're going down that route, you're also in like rooms. You have like 4 to 5 other roommates.
Yes.
I don't think you're getting busy in the dormitories.
It's a big castle.
Yeah.
Horny's
no,
horny.
No,
Oh
even in book 6 though, like literally they talk about in Ron for half the freaking book is him and Lavender snogging everywhere. Like, and it's an interesting dynamic because obviously when you're young, you kind of look up to the older generation of kids, but you don't exactly see that, I suppose. But at the same time, you have these, like you said, horny's horny. You have these 16, 17, 18-year-old boys and girls living with freaking 11-year-olds. Like, I think the world that J.K. Rowling created is very good, but I think her writing and storytelling is rather off-putting. Because I know personal experience as being, while I am a Hufflepuff and I am technically a Hufflepuff, I consider myself like what we call like a Hufflin, because I do have a lot of very Slytherin traits. I do identify with Slytherin stuff.
I should say that the first time I took that Pottermore quiz, I was a Slytherin. And then I deleted my account, made a new email, took it again, and I was a Hufflepuff.
I vaguely remember like that aspect.
There's your inner Slytherin.
Yeah. You
redid it until you got what you wanted.
No, literally, I got everything but Hufflepuff when I first got the Wizarding World app. I was just like, what is this?
Yeah, so then when I did it on the app, I got Hufflepuff, and I was like, okay, I'm fine with this. I don't care.
Then you is completely like bullshit, to be quite honest with you. It's not the full complete task that it used to be, and I think the full complete task showcased the person who's taking it personality more, because when I first took it and I got Slytherin, it only asked me the questions that were my Slytherin side. So like, like, what do you prefer, dark or light? Well, I prefer dark, so I chose Slytherin because of that, and I did get questions that were all the Hufflepuffers. And I do think it's one of those things with her storytelling where you have to be like, girl, what are you doing? But I don't know. We got to a weird topic on this, but yeah.
Fetus deletus. Just gonna bring that up one more time.
It was awesome. if we're gonna talk about it's not like they took math or sex ed. I mean, I know there's been a lot of like, memes and kind of there's like some BuzzFeed videos and stuff about like Snape giving, Hogwarts students sex ed and stuff. Even in what was it, the third book or something? One of the books, they try to go up to Hermione's like dorm to tell her something, and the stairs end up turning into a slide. And Hermione talks about how it's like a very old tradition or whatever, and it's stupid and whatnot. And I find that interesting for J.K. Rowling herself to have put in there, because while I do think it's kind of unfair that the girl students can come up to the boys' dormitories, but the boys can't go into the girls' dormitories, I do think it would be needed. That's not something that should be okay or allowed for 18-year-old boys to be able to go into girls' dormitories, or girls who are 12, going up to 18-year-old boys' dormitories. I think, and especially, coming from a person who has, been in situations in this matter, I think just the scenario that she's put into there is very rapey, to lack of a better.
Like, there could have been a better way that she could have. Excuse me, I have an air bubble in my throat. There could have been a better way that she could have, like, done with that. Like, I know for, like, at least some high schools and, like, some junior highs, they're on the same campus, but they're in different buildings.
Yeah.
You guys know what I'm saying? Like, it's in a whole different area. It's like,
and I mean,
she could have done something like that, but I guess having them all under the same roof kind of, implied that they were all students of the same school instead of having them off campus somewhere.
Well, and we have to think about the time that it was written, too. Is that this was
exactly.
late 90s, early 2000s, before, now.
Yeah.
I guess I think last book for Scholastic was published.
Well, I know the last movie that came out was 2011, so.
Right, so
I think last book came out was 97.
That sounds
yeah. No, but yeah, you're completely right. And also, J.K. Rowling is very known for her interesting views on things. I mean, most namely, the trans right views that have, come out in her tweets and stuff now.
Queen.
And a lot of.
Queen.
It looks like 07 was Deathly Hallows.
07.
Never mind.
07.
Wow.
Huh.
The first book came out in 97.
Oh, and the first book came out in 97. I'm like, there was something that happened in 97. Yeah, I don't remember what it was, but there was something that happened in 97.
Close enough.
Everything happened in
but
97,
yeah, like
10 years off.
Close. But yeah, like I said, I think it is also a J.K. Rowling thing, too, and I do think, though, give her credit talking about Harry Potter, the fact that we're still, arguing over if Snape's a good guy or a bad guy, or what great character, is points to her legacy and to the legacy of her character writing.
Absolutely, yeah. And I feel like it's very important to talk about that because, like, as of now, like, there's except for like a couple people, Lemon, you included, there's still few people who actually read books anymore. You guys know what I'm saying? Like, I'm sitting on my bed right now and I'm looking over at my bookshelf and I have all of the books on the top shelf of my bookshelf because that's the first series I ever fully read through. Not counting Percy Jackson, the Olympians, all that stuff. But like Harry Potter was the first official series that I went through and like actually read cover to cover of all of the books, not including Cursed Child because I didn't read that yet, but the main series.
You should.
Yeah,
you should. It's an interesting book.
Yeah, I have it. It's on my dresser, but I just haven't had a chance to like fully. I started it. I just never finished it.
Fair warning: you might throw your book against your wall at the end.
Yeah,
or midway through, as I did.
Midway through.
Yo, just yeet the book across the room.
Yeah.
Burn it with fire.
And then, knowing myself, I'll get a very angry either call or text message going, "I hate this book."
Yeah.
But yeah, one of you two is gonna get the very first text of when I finish it.
Yay. Happy, let me ask you this though. You how old were you when you started reading the books?
I want to say like end of 5th grade, early 6th grade, maybe.
Okay, yeah. So you still had a very child. Yeah, no, I know what you're saying. You still had a very, for lack of a better term, childish, or still a view of being a kid growing up reading them. You know what I'm saying? And a lot of people, reading Harry Potter, so they have this nostalgia of what they thought of when they first read it. And
yeah,
I think that also.
I think Serena, you got me hooked onto them.
Did I?
Yeah, you were reading it first, and I was like, "Oh, what are you reading?" And then you showed me, and I was like, oh, "Shit, this is cool." Which totally sounds. I'm sure that happened. That totally sounds like something that you would do.
See, I kind of had the opposite because everyone I'm not one for liking things that a lot of other people like. So my whole grade was reading Harry Potter, and I was like, eh. I had watched the first 2 movies and I liked them, but I hated the third, so I never continued. And my other friend, just like last year, got me into reading the books and actually sitting down to appreciate Harry Potter.
Thanks, Birdie.
Yeah, thank you, Birdie.
And I probably gonna listen, so thank you.
Yeah, I'm gonna send this to her, but
yes.
So hey, Birdie. But it gave me a very adult and different view on things. Because when I watched the first 2 movies, it does feel very nostalgic for me, and I remember watching them as a kid and what I thought of as a kid, and what I enjoyed as a kid. Whereas going from the 4th books on, I very much have a view of a 19-year-old adult, and I think that impacts all of us in where we started reading it and how we started reading it from. And a lot of people.
Yeah, because those were like the only good books to read.
Reading book 1 at yeah, no. People grew with Harry. They started reading the books when they were 11 and 12 and just kept reading them and grew with Harry as the time went on. And I think you have to take that into account in where people see things, and they probably put themselves in kind of the role of Harry, and everyone loves Harry and Daniel Radcliffe, girl crushes and whatnot. People put themselves in Harry and hate Snape without looking at the adult perspective or the mature perspective of not the little kid nostalgia anymore. If that makes
having
sense.
that adult perspective, as you mentioned, is kind of like, reading it back, years later, you start to kind of lose that childish glee.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I know, at least, for some of the books, the fifth one, as for everybody, I'm sure, was very hard to get through because it was so long. Let's be honest.
The fourth and fifth one, to be honest, was like the ones I breezed through. But go on.
Shut up. Regardless,
I'm a book nerd. We all know this.
But for people that were reading it, like, I know some people, they just couldn't get through the fourth or fifth book, and they were just like, okay, I'm done. Screw this. I'm not reading anymore.
That's basically what happened to me with the third one. Like, I hated the third movie and was like, nah, fuck that. And I really honestly didn't do justice to a great series that I realize now is a though has its faults, is a good world and really imaginative.
Yeah, and I think for like young writers and authors, like, it's a great book. Like, that's how I started writing like all of my characters. My first original character came from Harry Potter. The first one I ever wrote came from Harry Potter. And I kind of based her off of, aspects of Harry Potter, like making her house, making her wand, making her outfit, kind of like what I've done with like my other ones is like, but Harry Potter originally started my descent into writing madness.
Yeah, no, I completely understand that. I mean, as you know, Poppy, me and Birdie have been, creating our own storyline for the characters and stuff, and just viciously making up stories and putting plots together, and that's the fun of Harry Potter. I feel is that you can make it so personal, and you have these good characters, and you have this dynamic that allows you to feel like you're a part of something within the storyline. And being able to put yourself in the house and making your wand and picking your Patronuses. I mean, literally, me and Birdie were on the FaceTime for 3 hours looking at different Patronuses, and no, honestly, I have to show you what we found because we found the world's most ugliest bird, and it is amazing. also, we found out that lemmings will literally chuck themselves off cliffs to commit suicide. And if that's not the most amazing thing Mother Nature has come up with in forever, I don't know. Because a fucking weasel who commits suicide by chucking themselves off a cliff is amazing. Kind of off topic, sorry about that. But
10 out of 10. Anyway.
Yeah, just had to point that out. But yeah, it's one of those things where, like, yeah, even that, like, we had such fun, doing that and kind of exploring the storyline that we had, and even Poppy adding your character into it and making it so personal. I think you have to give credit to J.K. Rowling for that, no matter how you feel about her and whether you want to
credit
support
for a lot of things, because there's also been like a lot of spin-off, like not spin-off books, but like, you guys get what I'm saying, a lot of like other books, like Tales of Beedle the Bard, which we've all kind of fallen in love with.
Harry Potter the musical.
That too. Thank you.
Yeah.
But also like the books that are technically not hers, like Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them, like the picture books, or like any of that stuff that's technically hers, like her characters and her world, just not published by her. Does that make sense, what I'm trying to say?
Yeah.
Kind of, sort of.
Yeah. Okay. No, I get it. I don't know,
sure
but I get it.
Not sounding like an idiot over here that's coloring in her coloring book like a 2-year-old. Anyway, it's totally not what I've been doing for this whole episode. Not at all. What are you talking about?
Right. I think we're all just like huddled in our beds, but yeah.
Yeah. Well, speaking of episode, we have gone awfully long at this point.
We have.
Yeah.
I think with the end of that thought, that's a great place to end it.
It is. Thank you guys so much for listening, and thank you, everybody, my fellow players over here, my fellow witches, warlocks, whatever you guys are. for
Yeah,
joining me in
wizards.
this podcast journey. Appreciate it. It's much appreciated.
And as I will always be, I am Ditto.
I am Poppy.
I am Selena.
And I am Lemon.
Thank you for joining us.
We will see you in the
See
next
you next
one.
time.
Bye.